Anja stood before the massive hangar doors, her heart filled with anticipation as she prepared to guide the advanced jet down the runway at the aviation center. The gentle hum of the engines was a quiet sound compared to the clear communications coming through her radio. The lead pilot's voice was encouraging. "Let's see if she can perform as well as she did in the simulators. We're all excited to see you fly." Anja knew this moment would come. For months, her new colleagues in the 94th demonstration team had been curious about her abilities. She was the first pilot with her unique background to be assigned to their elite ranks, and they were eager to see how she would contribute her skills. To them, Anja was an interesting new addition, a fresh perspective rather than just another skilled pilot. What they didn't realize, though, was that she had been methodically focusing on teamwork during training, following a plan from her mentors to learn the team's dynamics before revealing her full potential. Today, as the aircraft's wheels lifted off the ground, she was about to demonstrate the skills that had earned her a place in that cockpit. But before we dive into why Captain Anja Schmidt would spend months observing while focusing on team integration, let's take a step back and understand how a young woman from the countryside became one of the most gifted pilots the esteemed aviation program had ever known. Anja grew up on a farm near a small town where her father, Klaus, spent long hours working the land and caring for animals. Her mother, Hildegard, was a school teacher, and Anja was expected to follow a similar path, perhaps becoming a veterinarian or managing the family farm. There was no aviation background in her family, no expectation that she would end up in the sky, let alone flying high-performance jets. But Anja was driven by a deep passion. From an early age, she felt an unexplainable pull toward flight and the open sky. After her studies, she applied to the Aviation Academy, securing a spot in the pilot training program with her outstanding qualifications. During the selection process, Anja stood out for her exceptional ability to understand complex aviation systems. In her first weeks at the academy, her instructors noted her natural grasp of aircraft mechanics, and her ability to absorb complex flight physics and aerodynamics was extraordinary. Yet what truly set her apart wasn't just her technical brilliance. It was her ability to think clearly under pressure, to process multiple streams of data and make decisions in the blink of an eye. During one challenging training simulation, she managed a complete systems malfunction, all while keeping the aircraft on course and navigating a series of precision checkpoints. She completed the mission successfully and brought the craft to a smooth landing using only manual controls. Her instructor would later recall, "I've been flying for 20 years, but I've never seen such composure and situational awareness." After completing basic pilot training, Anja was selected to join the Advanced Jet program, part of a highly regarded aviation fleet. The jet was an incredibly sophisticated machine, equipped with cutting-edge technology, efficient engines, and advanced avionics. To fly it, one had to understand not just the mechanics of the aircraft, but the intricacies of navigation, coordinated maneuvers, and information systems management. Anja dedicated herself to her training with a determination that few could match. She spent hours in simulators, studying every aspect of the jet, and quickly mastered the advanced tactics and technologies others found challenging. While her fellow trainees were focused on basic flying skills, Anja was already working with the integrated sensor systems that made the jet such a useful tool in modern aviation. Her instructors were astounded at her speed of learning, often remarking that she was thinking with the aircraft, not just flying it. When she completed her training, she was assigned to the 94th Demonstration Team, based in the heart of the country. This unit had earned its reputation as one of the most exclusive and prestigious flight teams in the world. The moment Anja arrived, she could sense the high expectations in the air. The 94th had a long history and a finely tuned group dynamic. The team's culture was steeped in traditions of excellence. The good-natured introductions started almost immediately. During her first briefing, the lead pilot shared his thoughts openly. "We have a new pilot, and I'm guessing we can expect some fresh ideas with this one. New talent and our jets? That could be an interesting combination." The other pilots in the squadron were equally curious, and while they were all polite and professional, it was clear that they looked forward to seeing how Eine would contribute to their tight-knit group. The most challenging part wasn't the training or the flying, it was her patience. Eine had been advised to blend in, to learn the team's unique style, and build a strong foundation. She was to build trust by performing competently and consistently. For 6 months, she followed the plan. She focused on mastering the team's core techniques, executing maneuvers with precision while holding back her more advanced skills. Her colleagues had no idea of the full extent of her capabilities. Every time they offered advice or shared their knowledge, Eine felt her confidence grow. What they didn't know was that her real journey was just beginning. It was about more than just flying. It was about demonstrating how exceptional talent could bring a new level of excellence to even the most accomplished team, and soon enough she would share her full capabilities with them all. The day everything changed arrived sooner than Eine expected. It came without warning, an ordinary morning at the airbase, the usual pre-flight routine. The squadron was preparing for a red flag exercise, a large-scale simulation designed to test their readiness against enemy forces. Eine knew that today would be different. As the briefing started, Major Weber's voice carried the usual disdain. "All right, people, we've got another exercise on the books. Let's see if any of you can manage to not mess it up this time." Eine stood at the back, her mind focused. She had no intention of merely fitting in anymore. The reality was clear. This wasn't just a drill, it was her chance to prove herself. The squadron's plan was straightforward. The exercise would involve intercepting a group of enemy aircraft attempting to breach German airspace. It would test their combat readiness, the coordination between pilots, and their ability to handle multiple simultaneous threats. Eine couldn't afford to hold back. She needed to show them that she was capable of more than they could ever imagine. As the briefing concluded, Major Weber turned to her, his eyes narrow. "Rogers, you'll be taking the rear. We'll need someone to cover our backs." She nodded, hiding her frustration. A backseat role was exactly what she had come to expect from the squadron's leadership. But as the pilots suited up and prepared to take off, Eine knew that today she would rewrite the rules. The mission began. As the pilots scrambled into their aircraft, Eine did the same, her heart racing as she ran through the pre-flight checklist. There were no more games, no more pretending. The F-22 was a machine she knew inside and out, and she had already decided she was going to take the lead in this operation, no matter what her colleagues thought. As the engines roared to life and the aircraft took off from the runway, Anya's focus sharpened. The sky above Leipzig was clear, but that wouldn't last for long. Anya, her hand steady on the controls, maintained a calm, measured pace. Major Weber's voice came through the comms. "Stay sharp, Rogers. This isn't some training exercise." Anya's response was brief but filled with conviction. "Understood, Major. I'll be right behind you." For the first time in months, she felt a surge of adrenaline, not from fear, but from anticipation. The red flag exercise was designed to be difficult, but she was no longer the rookie, the outsider. She was a pilot, ready for the real challenge. The exercise began with a simulated enemy threat appearing on their radar. The group of enemy aircraft had been assigned specific targets, and the squadron was expected to intercept them before they could penetrate German airspace. As the enemy targets appeared on Anya's radar, she immediately began processing the data. In the past, she would have held back, waiting for instructions, but now she felt an urge to take charge. Anya began weaving through the formation, aligning herself perfectly with the enemy's approach. She spoke calmly into the radio. "Viper, this is Phoenix. I'm going in for a closer look." The other pilots were taken aback by her sudden move, but she didn't care. This was her moment. Her mind was focused entirely on the task at hand. She began to close the distance between herself and the enemy aircraft, her radar providing constant updates. It was as though she was working with the F-22, not just flying it. The aircraft seemed to respond to her every thought, moving through the air with an uncanny precision. Major Weber's voice came through again, this time with a hint of concern. "Rogers, I told you to stay in formation. This isn't a solo mission." Anya smiled inwardly, knowing he didn't understand. To him, she was still the rookie, but she was far more than that. As she closed the gap, she noticed the enemy aircraft breaking formation, attempting to evade. This wasn't part of the training exercise. They were testing their limits, trying to push the squadron into making mistakes. But Anya wasn't going to make any. She adjusted her speed, positioning herself for the perfect intercept. "Phoenix to formation. I have a lock on one of the targets. Engaging now." Before her squadron mates could react, Anya released the first missile. It streaked away from the F-22 at a speed that seemed almost unnatural. A perfect shot. She watched as the enemy aircraft exploded in a flash of light. Major Weber's voice came through, now tinged with surprise. "Rogers, did you just—" But Anya wasn't listening. She had already lined up her next target. The tension in her squadron increased as the simulated dogfight continued. Each time Anya fired, another enemy aircraft fell. She was executing the kind of maneuvers that other pilots only dreamed of, maneuvers that, until now, no one had thought possible. Within minutes, Anya had single-handedly wiped out half of the enemy force. The rest were retreating, realizing they had underestimated the young pilot they had once mocked. As she returned to formation, Anya's heart was racing, not from fear, but from exhilaration. This was what she was born to do. This was what she had been hiding for so long. As the mission ended and the squadron returned to base, Major Weber didn't say a word. He simply nodded as he passed Anya on the tarmac. She knew that he had seen what she could do. The others were slower to catch on, but eventually they had no choice but to recognize her skills. She had done it. She had proven herself, not just to them, but to herself. For the first time in months, Anya felt like she truly belonged. The whispers and doubts would continue, but now they were irrelevant. Anya Schmidt had made her mark. The days following the red flag exercise were filled with a mix of admiration and silence. Anya's colleagues, who had once mocked her, now seemed hesitant to speak to her. Major Weber, who had been her harshest critic, barely made eye contact, but she didn't need their approval. Anya knew that her actions in the sky had spoken louder than any words ever could. The shift in her squadron's dynamic wasn't immediate. The lingering doubts about her abilities, especially from the older pilots, weren't easily erased. But for Anya, the most significant change wasn't the respect she'd earned. It was the realization that she had taken control of her fate. She was no longer hiding in the shadows, pretending to be just another competent pilot. She had proven that she was more than that. The next few weeks were a blur of intense training and combat simulations, each one a step closer to the real challenges that lay ahead. Anya felt herself growing stronger, more confident with every mission. But she knew that the true test was still to come. It was only a matter of time before they faced a real threat. That moment arrived sooner than expected. It came as an urgent call on the radio, an actual combat alert. A wave of enemy aircraft was heading toward German airspace. The squadron scrambled into action, the adrenaline kicking in as they rushed to their planes. Anya was already in the cockpit before the rest of the squadron even started their pre-flight checks. She was no longer the rookie. She was the leader. The enemy aircraft were on their way, and she was ready to face them head-on. Major Weber's voice came through the radio as the squadron took off. "This is it, people. We don't know what we're up against, but we'll be ready." But Anya knew they were about to learn a harsh lesson. The simulation exercises had been nothing compared to what they would face now. This wasn't about practice. It was about survival. As the squadron reached their patrol area, Anya could see the blips on the radar. The enemy was closing in fast. They were well coordinated, moving as a unit, and their formation was tight. Anya didn't need anyone to tell her that this wasn't just another test. This was real. The squadron had no time to waste. Anya keyed her microphone. "Phoenix to formation. I'll take the lead. You follow my lead, Major." Major Weber's voice crackled with hesitation but didn't argue. "Copy that, Phoenix. Stay sharp." Anya's heart rate was steady, her breath calm as she initiated the first move. Her mind was already working at full capacity, analyzing every move, every angle, every threat. She knew that in combat, every second mattered. The squadron moved into position and the engagement began. The enemy aircraft fired first, missiles streaking toward them with deadly precision, but Anya was ready. She weaved through the incoming fire, her F-22 moving with an almost unnatural grace. Every calculation, every movement felt instinctive. The enemy had no idea who they were dealing with. As the first wave of missiles whizzed by, Anya launched her own counterattack. Her radar locked onto multiple targets simultaneously. The F-22's advanced targeting systems worked in sync with her mind, creating a perfect storm of coordinated destruction. "Fox 3, she called, and the first missile launched. Within seconds, an enemy aircraft exploded in a fiery blaze. She didn't wait. She was already lining up her next shot. The squadron followed her lead, but Anya was always one step ahead. The enemy was disorganized now, reacting to her every move, but never quite fast enough. Anya's mind was in overdrive as she tracked each target, engaging them with deadly accuracy. In just minutes, half of the enemy force was eliminated. The remaining aircraft began to retreat, but it was too late. Anya wasn't done yet. She closed the distance, engaging each remaining target with surgical precision. One by one, the enemy aircraft fell from the sky. "Splash 1, splash 2, splash 3, she reported calmly, as if she were calling out numbers at a training exercise, not eliminating threats to national security. As the final enemy aircraft turned to flee, Anya gave chase, closing the gap with a speed and agility that left her squadron mates in awe. They couldn't keep up with her. The F-22 responded to her every thought as if it were an extension of herself. With a final missile, Anya completed the mission. 12 enemy aircraft eliminated, all within 10 minutes. The squadron landed back at base, but the atmosphere was different this time. There was no mocking, no hesitation, only respect. As Anya climbed out of the cockpit, she found Major Weber waiting for her on the tarmac. His face was solemn, his usual bravado replaced with something Anya hadn't seen before, genuine admiration. "Rogers," he said, his voice quiet but filled with respect. "That was the most impressive display I've ever seen in my career. You didn't just prove yourself today, you redefined what's possible in combat." Anya nodded, but her mind was already on the next challenge. She had done what was expected of her, but she knew that this was just the beginning. The real work, the real test of her abilities, was still ahead. The respect from her peers, the recognition, it was all secondary. What mattered now was what she would do with the power she had earned. She had proved herself in the skies. But now it was time to show them what else she was capable of. The future was hers for the taking. Weeks passed, and Anya's reputation continued to grow within the squadron. There was a noticeable shift in how her colleagues treated her. The once subtle whispers and sideways glances had been replaced with genuine respect. Major Weber, who had been her harshest critic, now sought her input during mission briefings. He didn't always agree with her, but he listened. Her fellow pilots, once skeptical, were beginning to realize the truth. Anya was no longer the diversity hire, She was a leader, a force to be reckoned with. But even as the recognition from her peers grew, Anja remained focused on one thing: the mission. There was always more to be done, more to be learned. The stakes were higher now. With each new mission, the tension built. The world outside the airbase was changing, and the threat of real combat seemed ever more imminent. The next test for Anja and her squadron came when an intelligence report indicated that enemy forces had developed new stealth technology that could potentially bypass Germany's air defenses. The implications were dire. This wasn't just another exercise. It was a matter of national security. Anja knew the risks. She had faced danger before, but this time the consequences of failure were far greater. The squadron was put on high alert. The mission was clear: intercept and eliminate any hostile aircraft attempting to breach German airspace. It was going to be a real test of their skills, and Anja knew that her time to shine had come again. The briefings began early, and the atmosphere was tense. Major Weber was unusually quiet, his normally confident demeanor replaced by a look of concern. As the team gathered around the table, Anja could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another drill. This was real. The plan was simple: identify and eliminate the enemy aircraft before they could get close to their target. But the complexity of the mission was in the details. These were not the same threats they had trained for in the past. The enemy aircraft had new capabilities, and it was up to Anja and the squadron to prove that their skills, their training, and their resolve were enough to stop them. As the squadron prepared to take off, the tension in the air was palpable. Anja could feel it in her chest, the adrenaline, the anticipation. She had flown countless missions before, but this one felt different. This one mattered. The team took to the skies, and Anja's F-22 hummed beneath her, a trusted companion. As they approached the designated airspace, Anja's radar lit up with multiple targets. The enemy was approaching, and they were closing in fast. Anja's mind began to work in overdrive as she processed the data. The enemy aircraft were using advanced stealth tactics, making them nearly invisible to conventional radar. But Anja was no ordinary pilot. She knew how to use the F-22's advanced systems to their advantage. She activated the stealth radar detection system and began to track the enemy targets. Within seconds, she had locked onto the first aircraft. Major Weber's voice came over the comms, tension in his voice. "Rogers, do you have a clear lock?" Anja's voice was calm, steady. "I've got them, Major. I'm going in for the intercept." The enemy aircraft were moving in tight formation, their stealth technology making them difficult to track, but Anja's F-22 was equipped with the tools to pierce through that invisibility. As she closed in on the target, her radar system adjusted, scanning for even the slightest signal. It was like hunting in the dark, but Anja was used to it. She had trained for this moment. "Fox 3, she called, releasing a missile that streaked toward the first enemy aircraft. The missile hit its target with surgical precision, destroying the aircraft in an explosion of flames. But the remaining enemy fighters weren't giving up. They began to break formation, attempting evasive maneuvers. But Anja was already one step ahead. She maneuvered her aircraft into position, locking onto another target before they could react. "Splash 1, she reported calmly. She fired again. Splash 2. Within moments, half of the enemy squadron had been eliminated, their stealth tactics no match for Anja's expertise. Major Weber's voice came through, disbelief in his tone. "How are you doing this, Rogers?" Anja didn't answer. She didn't need to. The F-22 responded to her every command with seamless efficiency, and she was already moving on to the next target. One by one, the enemy aircraft fell from the sky. Anja's radar continued to guide her, every move calculated, every shot precise. There was no room for error. As the last of the enemy planes began to retreat, Anja pushed forward, determined to finish what she had started. She closed the distance, launching another missile. "Splash 3," she called as the final enemy aircraft was destroyed. The squadron had done it. 12 enemy fighters eliminated in under 15 minutes. No casualties. Anja's voice remained steady as she gave her report. Mission complete. All targets eliminated. As the squadron made its way back to base, the atmosphere was one of quiet awe. No one spoke, but the looks exchanged said everything. Anja had proven herself again, this time to the entire squadron. As they landed, Major Weber approached her. There was no mockery now, no condescension, just respect. "Rogers," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "That was beyond anything we could have imagined. You saved this mission. You saved all of us." Anja didn't respond. She didn't need to. The mission had spoken for itself. She had earned the respect of her squadron, not through words, but through her actions. The true test of a leader wasn't in the accolades or the praise. It was in the quiet moments after the battle, when the dust had settled and everyone knew who had been responsible for the victory. Anja Schmidt had proven that she wasn't just a pilot. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the weeks passed after the successful mission, the atmosphere within the squadron began to change. Anja's reputation had shifted from that of the newcomer to the undeniable leader. It wasn't just her flying that had impressed her colleagues. It was the calm confidence she displayed under pressure, the way she could think multiple steps ahead, anticipating moves and countering threats before they had even materialized. Anja had earned the respect she had once sought, but there was no time to bask in that victory. The nature of military life was constant pressure, constant vigilance. It wasn't long before a new challenge arose. A high-stakes international mission was announced, a covert operation to intercept an unknown foreign aircraft believed to be breaching European airspace. This wasn't a drill. This was real, and it carried the potential for escalating into an international crisis. As the briefing began, Anja could sense the gravity of the situation. The room was filled with high-ranking officers and the best pilots the squadron had to offer. Major Weber was at the front, his usual confidence replaced by a solemn air. "We don't have the luxury of mistakes on this one," he began, his tone serious. "Intel suggests that the aircraft in question may not be hostile initially, but it is violating sovereign airspace. We need to intercept it, identify it, and, if necessary, neutralize the threat." Anja listened intently. The mission was clear: identify, engage if necessary, and bring the aircraft down if it refused to comply. But there was more to it than that. The situation was politically sensitive. A misstep could lead to diplomatic fallout. The operation required precision, restraint, and above all, absolute professionalism. It was a test not just of their flying skills, but of their ability to handle the delicate nature of the mission. As the briefing ended and the pilots began preparing for the mission, Anja could feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. This time, it wasn't just about proving herself to her squadron. It was about defending her country's airspace, and doing so in a way that didn't spark conflict. The aircraft in question was already en route, and the squadron scrambled to meet it in the skies. Anja's F-22 roared to life as she made her way to the runway, her thoughts sharp and focused. There was no room for hesitation now. The team was counting on her. As they reached the intercept point, the radar lit up. The unknown aircraft was within range. Anja's heart beat steadily as she studied the target. It was unlike any aircraft she had ever encountered before. It didn't appear to be military, but it wasn't civilian either. It was a hybrid of sorts, something that didn't quite fit the usual patterns. Major Weber's voice came over the comms. "Rogers, you're in charge of the intercept. We need to figure out who this is and why they're in our airspace." Anja acknowledged the order, her mind already processing the data. She moved into position, closing the gap between her aircraft and the unknown target. Her radar systems flared to life, tracking the target with increasing precision. The enemy aircraft was trying to evade, making erratic turns in an attempt to throw off their pursuers. But Anja wasn't fooled. She'd been trained to handle this kind of situation, and she wasn't about to let this aircraft slip through their fingers. The airspace around them was crowded with clouds and shifting winds, making the approach even more difficult. But Anja stayed focused, trusting in the F-22's capabilities. As she closed the distance, she issued a calm order to her squadron. "Viper, stay in formation. We move in together." The unknown aircraft was now within range, and Anja had one chance to make the right decision. She was moments away from locking on when something unexpected happened. The aircraft made a sudden maneuver, dropping to a lower altitude and heading straight for a civilian air corridor. Anja's heart skipped a beat. If she didn't act quickly, the aircraft would fly directly into a heavily trafficked civilian zone. This was a decision no pilot should ever have to make. But Anja was trained for this. She immediately altered her course, blocking the unknown aircraft's path. It was a risky move, one that could spark an international incident if things went wrong. Major Weber's voice crackled through the comms, but Anja was already ahead of him. "Viper, keep your distance. I'm taking the lead on this." With one fluid motion, Anja locked onto the target and fired a warning shot just ahead of the aircraft. It wasn't a direct hit, but it was enough to send a message. The unknown aircraft immediately veered off course, breaking formation. Anja followed closely, her F-22's engines roaring as she closed the distance once more. The decision had been made. This aircraft was not a civilian, and it was not going to escape. The next moments passed in a blur. Anja's radar systems confirmed that the aircraft was a modified civilian jet, heavily modified for stealth with no clear identification. It was an illegal entry into European airspace, and the pilot had failed to respond to multiple warnings. As Anja prepared to engage, her mind flashed back to the training simulations. This wasn't just about a victory in the sky. This was about protecting innocent lives on the ground. With one final move, Anja fired, her missile finding its target with perfect precision. The aircraft exploded in a ball of fire, falling harmlessly into the sea. The mission was a success, but there was no time to celebrate. Major Weber's voice came over the comms, his tone still serious, but laced with a new level of respect. "Rogers, that was one of the most difficult calls I've ever seen you make. You did the right thing." Anja's voice remained steady. "Mission complete, Major. No casualties." As the squadron returned to base, Anja felt the weight of the decision she had made. It wasn't the first time she had taken a life in the air, but it was the first time she had done it under such pressure. The mission had been a success, but Anja knew that the true cost of victory wasn't always measured in the destruction of an enemy. Sometimes it was in the price you paid in your own heart. When they landed back at the airbase, Anja climbed out of her cockpit and was met by Major Weber. His expression was different now. Gone was the cynicism, replaced by genuine admiration. "You saved a lot of lives today, Rogers. More than you know." Anja nodded quietly, knowing that the victory had come at a high cost. But she also knew that in this line of work, that was the reality. The mission always came first, and she would be ready for whatever came next. The weeks that followed the covert mission were marked by an uneasy silence. The squadron had returned from the operation victorious, but the price of that victory weighed heavily on Anja. While the mission itself had been a success, it had come at a moral cost she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The loss of life, even that of an enemy, lingered in her thoughts. There were no heroes in the war she fought, only soldiers doing what was necessary. But as she sat in the quiet of her quarters late at night, Anya couldn't help but wonder, was she truly prepared to carry the weight of those decisions for the rest of her life? Major Weber's words after the mission replayed in her mind. You did the right thing. But was it really the right thing? The uncertainty was a constant companion now. Despite the internal struggle, Anya knew there was no turning back. This was her life, and it was a life that demanded tough decisions. The next mission came swiftly, as they always did in the world of military aviation. This time, the threat was different. A new intelligence report had surfaced, one suggesting that a foreign nation had developed a highly advanced drone capable of infiltrating secure airspace undetected. The mission was clear: track down and neutralize the drone before it could pose a threat to national security. It wasn't just about intercepting an enemy aircraft. It was about adapting to a new kind of warfare. Drones had changed the game. They could fly longer, faster, and more stealthily than traditional aircraft. Anya understood the implications of this mission better than most. She had spent years studying the evolving tactics of modern warfare, and she knew that drones represented a paradigm shift in aerial combat. The briefings for the mission were long and detailed, and Major Weber's usual confidence was nowhere to be found. The entire squadron was tasked with hunting down this elusive target, but it was clear that the burden of responsibility would fall squarely on Anya's shoulders. As the team prepared to launch, the weight of the mission was almost palpable. Anya could feel the tension in the air as she walked toward her F-22, her mind focused and steady. The squadron had trained for this moment, but there was no manual for fighting drones. The sky would be their battleground, and Anya was determined to make sure they came out on top. The hunt began. The drones had been tracked to a remote region near the Czech border. As the squadron flew into the designated airspace, Anya's radar immediately picked up multiple targets. They were quick, erratic in their movements, and almost invisible against the backdrop of the clouds. The drones had advanced cloaking technology, but it was no match for the F-22's sophisticated systems. Anya locked on to the first drone, the targeting system beeping softly as the missile lock was established. But the drone wasn't going down without a fight. It suddenly dipped, evading Anya's initial strike and disappearing into the clouds. Her heart raced as she recalibrated her targeting systems. It was like hunting a ghost in the sky. "Phoenix to Viper, I've lost visual on the target," Anya called out, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "Copy that, Phoenix," Major Weber responded. "Stay sharp. We can't afford to let them get away." Anya adjusted her altitude, scanning the skies for any sign of movement. It wasn't just about the technology. It was about reading the enemy, anticipating their moves. The drones weren't just flying blind. They were being controlled remotely, and the controller would be somewhere, waiting for their next move. Anya's mind raced through the possibilities. The drone reappeared on her radar. She had it locked. With a swift motion, she fired her missile, and the drone was gone in an instant. "Splash one," Anya reported, her voice calm but filled with the satisfaction of victory. But this was far from over. The squadron continued to engage, each pilot struggling to outmaneuver the drones. They were fast, but Anya was faster. Her radar system worked seamlessly with her instincts, and her aircraft responded to her commands as if it were a living entity. The squadron worked together, each pilot taking down one drone after another. But as the engagement continued, Anya felt a shift in the air, a subtle change, like something had gone wrong. Her instincts screamed at her to look behind, and when she did, her heart skipped a beat. Another drone had appeared behind them, its stealth technology nearly making it invisible to their systems. The squadron didn't see it, but Anya did. She was the only one who knew. Without hesitation, she broke formation, locking onto the new target. "Viper, stay on course. I'll handle this one," Anya called out. Major Weber's voice crackled with urgency. "Rogers, don't engage alone. You don't know what you're dealing with." But Anya didn't hesitate. She couldn't. She fired again, and the drone was destroyed before anyone could even react. The squadron landed back at base, their mission successful. But as Anya climbed out of her cockpit, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle wasn't won in the skies. It was in the choices they made, the decisions that had to be made in the heat of the moment. Major Weber approached her, his expression one of respect. "You've got a gift, Rogers, but you're pushing too hard. You need to trust your team. You're not alone out there." Anya nodded, knowing that Weber was right. She had taken the lead in the fight against the drones, but she had also isolated herself in doing so. The mission was a success, but she was beginning to realize that leadership wasn't about always being the one to save the day. It was about knowing when to let others share the burden. As the squadron debriefed, Anya thought about the future. There would be more missions, more dangers. But the hardest battle, she realized, was one that had nothing to do with flying. It was about learning to trust, learning to lead, and learning to be part of something greater than herself. The fight in the sky was just one part of the journey. The real challenge was what came after. After the mission, the airbase felt quieter, as though everyone was waiting for something. The squadron had returned victorious once again, but Anya couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that something was missing. The mission had gone as planned, but Major Weber's words lingered in her mind. She had isolated herself from the squadron, and although the drones had been destroyed, she realized she had failed to truly lead. Leadership wasn't just about taking charge in the heat of battle. It was about guiding others through the chaos and making decisions that benefited the whole team. Over the next few days, Anya reflected on what Weber had said. She realized that while she had proven her skills as a fighter pilot, she hadn't yet proven herself as a true leader. She couldn't keep fighting battles on her own. She needed to trust her squadron, to let them grow alongside her. The next operation presented a new challenge, one that would test not only Anya's flying abilities, but also her ability to work as part of a team. This time, it wasn't just about intercepting hostile aircraft or neutralizing threats. This time, they were going to train in formation flying and advanced aerial tactics with an emphasis on squadron coordination. Anya understood that this mission wasn't about individual prowess. It was about synchronization. As the pilots assembled for the briefing, Anya found herself at the front of the room, the weight of responsibility squarely on her shoulders. Major Weber gave her a nod of encouragement as she took the floor. "This is going to be about working together," Anya began, her voice clear and steady. "We've been operating as individuals, but now it's time to come together as a team. Our strength lies in our ability to act as one." The room fell silent as the pilots listened. Anya could sense the shift in the atmosphere. They were ready. The squadron took to the skies, and Anya found herself flying not as a lone wolf, but as part of a carefully coordinated formation. At first, it was awkward. The maneuvers were unfamiliar, and the squadron pilots struggled to find their rhythm. Anya could feel the frustration building, but she remained calm, trusting that this was the process. The team would get there. It wasn't easy, but gradually they began to move in unison. The once jerky turns smoothed out, and the distance between planes shortened. They were learning to read each other's movements, anticipating the next step before it even happened. Anya's heart swelled with pride as the squadron began to fly as one. There were still mistakes, moments when things didn't go according to plan, but Anya understood that the process of becoming a cohesive unit was never linear. It took time, patience, and trust. As the formation flying session came to an end, the squadron landed back at base, tired but exhilarated. Anya climbed out of her cockpit and found Major Weber waiting for her. His face was solemn, but there was a spark of something else in his eyes. Pride. "That was impressive," he said. "You managed to pull us together when it counted. That's the mark of a real leader." Anya nodded, but there was still a long way to go. She had begun to understand the importance of leadership, but it wasn't something that could be learned in a day. It was something that had to be practiced, refined over time. The mission was a success, but Anya knew the real work was still ahead. As the squadron continued their training over the next few weeks, Anya found herself becoming more confident in her role as a leader. She was no longer afraid to rely on her team, to trust them with decisions and responsibilities. The squadron was evolving, and so was she, but there were still challenges on the horizon. The world outside the airbase was becoming more unpredictable. The geopolitical landscape was shifting, and with it came new threats. The next mission, Anya knew, would be unlike anything they had faced before. It would test not only their skills, but their ability to adapt to an ever-changing world. But for the first time in a long time, Anya was ready. She had learned to trust her squadron, to lead by example, and to understand that true strength came from unity. Whatever came next, she knew they would face it together. The road ahead would be tough, but Anya was no longer walking it alone. She had found her place within the squadron, and now they were ready to face whatever came their way. The next mission came with a chilling sense of urgency. Intelligence had gathered reports of a rogue state developing advanced, long-range missiles capable of targeting critical European infrastructure. The international community was on high alert, and tensions were rising. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Anya felt the weight of the mission settle on her shoulders as she prepared for the briefing. This wasn't just a matter of intercepting an aircraft or a drone. This was about national security on a global scale. As she entered the briefing room, Major Weber stood at the front, his demeanor grim. "The situation has escalated," he began, his voice low but firm. "We have credible intelligence that a rogue state has developed weapons capable of breaching our air defenses. Our job is to prevent them from launching these weapons and to take out any threats that come our way." The room was tense as the pilots processed the gravity of the mission. Anya knew that this wasn't just another training exercise. This was real, and failure was not an option. The squadron would be divided into teams, each assigned a specific task. Anya, as expected, would be leading one of the intercept teams. As she listened to the briefing, she couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the lives of countless civilians, the future of European security, and the reputation of her squadron. There was no room for mistakes. As the squadron made final preparations, Anya felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. But this time, it was different. This wasn't a fight to prove herself. It was a fight for survival. The team took to the skies, and as Anya's F-22 roared to life beneath her, she felt a sense of purpose that had been missing in previous missions. This wasn't about proving a point. It was about defending everything they had worked for. The squadron flew in tight formation as they approached the coordinates of the rogue missile launcher. Anya's radar flared to life as they closed in on their target. The missile silo was heavily guarded, and there were enemy aircraft in the area, ready to defend it. The tension in the air was palpable as the squadron prepared for the assault. Anya's heart beat steadily, her focus absolute. She locked onto the first target, a hostile aircraft approaching from the west. "Phoenix to formation. We've got company. Stay sharp and be ready for engagement." The enemy aircraft didn't wait. They fired first, missiles streaking toward the squadron. Anya weaved through the incoming fire, her F-22 responding to her every command. The squadron engaged the enemy with precision, taking out aircraft after aircraft. The battle was fast and chaotic, but Anja remained calm, her instincts guiding her every move. Her mind was working in overdrive as she processed the data, her F-22's advanced systems working in tandem with her skills. This was the kind of mission she had trained for. She fired her first missile, taking down one of the enemy aircraft, then another. Each shot was calculated, deliberate. The enemy was in disarray, unable to keep up with the speed and agility of the F-22. As the last of the enemy aircraft fell from the sky, Anja's squadron moved in on the missile silo. They couldn't afford to let the launch take place. The silo was heavily defended, but Anja and her team were prepared. They descended quickly, launching precision-guided munitions to destroy the silo and neutralize the threat. The explosion was deafening, the missile silo reduced to rubble in a flash of light. The mission was a success, but there was no time to celebrate. The squadron returned to base in silence, the weight of their actions hanging in the air. Anja knew that they had prevented a catastrophe, but she also understood that the war wasn't over. There would always be more threats, more challenges. As they landed, Major Weber approached her, his face unreadable. "Good work, Rogers," he said, his voice tight. "You led your team well, but we're not done yet. There's always more to do." Anja nodded, understanding the unspoken message. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. She had once again proven herself, but the cost of victory was heavy. The world had changed, and she had changed with it. As she walked off the tarmac, Anja couldn't shake the feeling that they were entering a new era of warfare, one where the lines between traditional combat and technological warfare were becoming increasingly blurred. She had learned to trust her squadron, to lead them, but there was still much to learn. The road ahead would be long, and the challenges would only grow more complex. But Anja knew one thing for sure: she was ready. The future of air superiority would depend on pilots who could adapt, who could think differently. And Anja was determined to be one of those pilots. In the weeks following the success of the missile silo mission, the squadron entered a period of uneasy calm. Tensions remained high, but Anja sensed a shift within herself. The pressure of leadership, the weight of each mission, had transformed her. She no longer saw herself as merely a pilot trying to prove her worth. She was a leader, a strategist, someone who understood the complex dynamics of both air combat and team coordination. Despite the quiet, the world outside their secure airspace continued to change. Global political tensions were rising, and military advancements were occurring at a pace the world had never seen before. Anja knew that sooner or later their next mission would be unlike anything they had faced. Her intuition proved correct. One afternoon, the squadron was called to a secure briefing. Major Weber stood at the front, his usual seriousness tinged with a new urgency. The intelligence was clear. An advanced air defense system had been deployed by a rival nation, one capable of neutralizing any incoming fighter jets. This was no ordinary operation. If they didn't act quickly, their ability to defend European airspace could be compromised. The mission was to destroy this defense system before it could be fully operational. Anja listened intently as Weber outlined the plan. The squadron would have to infiltrate enemy territory undetected, disable the air defense system, and then engage any additional forces that might try to stop them. The operation was highly classified, and failure wasn't an option. Anja understood the stakes more than anyone. This wasn't just about fighting in the sky, it was about ensuring the security of the airspace that protected everything they held dear. As the squadron prepared for their mission, Anja's mind raced. This wasn't just another intercept or aerial engagement. It was a delicate, calculated operation that would require them to operate in enemy territory, where every move could be their last. The planning was meticulous. Anya's role was clear: lead the strike team to the air defense system and ensure the squadron's success. It was a mission that demanded precision, strategy, and above all, a deep trust in her fellow pilots. The night before the mission, Anya couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk reviewing the intelligence reports, memorizing the coordinates, and mentally rehearsing every step. She knew that tomorrow would be different. This mission had no room for mistakes. The next morning, as the squadron assembled for their pre-flight briefing, Anya felt the familiar rush of adrenaline course through her veins. Major Weber's voice rang out, filled with resolve. "This is it, people. We've trained for this. The enemy has a system in place that could threaten our airspace, but we are going to stop it before it gets out of hand. Stay sharp, stay focused, and follow your orders." As the pilots prepared for takeoff, Anya exchanged a look with her team. They didn't need words. They were ready. The F-22s roared to life, and the squadron soared into the sky, heading towards the enemy's heavily defended airspace. The mission was underway. The closer they got to their target, the more intense the atmosphere became. Anya's radar scanned for any sign of enemy aircraft, while her squadron followed in tight formation, maintaining radio silence. The air was thick with tension. As they crossed the border into enemy territory, Anya's heartbeat quickened. They were flying in the dark now. Every move had to be calculated. Their target was in sight. The enemy air defense system was housed in a heavily fortified facility located deep within hostile territory. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by surface-to-air missile batteries and enemy fighters patrolling the area. The squadron's first task was to disable the air defense system without being detected. They couldn't afford to be discovered before they struck. Anya gave the order for a low-level pass. The squadron descended rapidly, flying beneath the radar to avoid detection. The facility loomed ahead, and Anya's heart beat in sync with the F-22's engines. The ground was coming up fast, but she knew this was their best shot. "Phoenix to Viper, on my mark, we execute. Stay sharp," she called, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The plan was simple. Anya and her team would use precision weapons to disable the air defense system, while the rest of the squadron would cover them and ensure that no enemy fighters got in their way. As the target approached, Anya keyed in the coordinates, and with a deep breath, she released the first set of bombs. The explosion rocked the ground below, and the facility erupted in flames. The air defense system was offline, but the enemy was quick to respond. Within seconds, enemy fighters scrambled to intercept. Anya's squadron was ready. The sky erupted into chaos as the squadron engaged the incoming enemy aircraft. Anya moved like lightning, her F-22 responding with deadly precision as she took down one aircraft after another. The enemy was organized, but they weren't prepared for the speed and agility of the F-22. As Anya fired her final missile, she could hear Major Weber's voice crackling through the comms. "Phoenix, we're clear. All targets eliminated." The mission was a success, but the cost was high. As the squadron returned to base, Anya felt the weight of the operation settle on her shoulders. It wasn't just about the lives saved. It was about the toll it took on her, on all of them. When they landed, Major Weber approached Anya, his expression one of pride. "You did it, Rogers. You led us through one of the most difficult missions we've ever had. I couldn't have asked for a better leader." Anya nodded, but inside she knew that the work wasn't done. There would be more missions, more challenges. And while the squadron had succeeded today, the future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Anya had earned her place not just as a pilot, but as a true leader, and she was ready for whatever came next. The aftermath of the successful mission left the squadron with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Anja, like the rest of her team, had just completed one of the most demanding and dangerous operations of her career. The sense of accomplishment was undeniable, but it was also fleeting. In the world they inhabited, victories were often short-lived, replaced quickly by the reality of the next challenge. For Anja, this mission had reinforced what she had known for some time. Leadership wasn't just about executing plans, it was about guiding your team through every step, adapting to unforeseen circumstances, and maintaining focus, no matter the odds. The days following the mission were quieter than usual. The squadron had returned to base, and while the operations continued, there was a palpable shift in the air. Anja could sense that the pilots had newfound respect for one another. The dynamics within the squadron had changed once again. The camaraderie that had always been part of the military life now felt more genuine, more connected. Anja had grown as a leader, and she had done so by trusting her team. They had learned to trust her in return. However, the quiet wasn't destined to last. Just as the squadron began settling into routine operations, an urgent message came through. It was a communication from the highest levels of command, alerting them to a new and unprecedented threat: a cyber attack on military communication systems. The attack was widespread, targeting air defense networks across Europe. This new form of warfare, though invisible in nature, had the potential to bring nations to their knees. It was a battle fought in the shadows, with no clear enemy to confront. Anja knew that the battle they were about to face would require not just pilots, but all of their skills in technological warfare and strategy. The mission was clear: prevent the cyber attack from crippling their defense systems and restore control over the affected networks. This wasn't a traditional mission. It wasn't about missiles or dogfights in the sky. It was a race against time to outsmart an invisible enemy. As Anja walked into the briefing room, Major Weber's face was more serious than ever. This was no longer about tactical superiority or aerial combat. It was about national survival. The squadron would be part of a broader operation to track down and neutralize the source of the cyber attack. But even as they prepared for the operation, Anja couldn't shake the feeling that this was a different kind of war. A war fought not with weapons, but with knowledge, precision, and speed. The squadron would need to rely on their training, their technology, and their intelligence networks more than ever before. The mission brief outlined their tasks: infiltrate critical facilities suspected of harboring the cyber attack's origin, gather intelligence on the attacker's methods, and restore control to military systems. There was a sense of urgency in the air. If the attackers succeeded, European air defense systems would be crippled, and the consequences would be dire. Anja's role in this mission was different from anything she had faced before. As a leader, she would not just guide her squadron through aerial combat, but would have to oversee the coordination between military intelligence, cybersecurity teams, and her pilots in the field. The mission required precision on all fronts. The squadron's task was to provide air cover while military cyber specialists worked to isolate and neutralize the attack. As Anja reviewed the mission plan, she felt the weight of the responsibility settle in her chest. The line between traditional warfare and cyber warfare was becoming increasingly blurred, and it was up to them to protect the systems that kept their world secure. The squadron took off early the next morning, their F-22s cutting through the skies as they made their way toward the facility believed to be the heart of the attack. Anja's mind was already working through the logistics. They had to stay sharp, ready for anything. As they neared the facility, their radar picked up multiple signals indicating potential hostile forces nearby. It wasn't just a cyber attack. They were now facing physical threats as well. The squadron had to protect the site at all costs. The enemy was using electronic warfare of its own, trying to jam communications and disrupt their technology. Anja's F-22 responded flawlessly, counteracting the interference and maintaining a steady lock on the target. It was a race against time. The cyber attack was spreading, and the pressure to protect their assets grew with every passing minute. As Anja's team flew reconnaissance over the site, enemy fighters appeared on the horizon. This was it, the aerial engagement they had been trained for. Anja signaled her squadron. Viper, engage at will. We're not leaving until this site is secure. The squadron responded immediately, taking out the first wave of enemy fighters with deadly precision. But the battle didn't end there. With every victory in the sky, Anja could sense the urgency of the situation growing. The cyber attack was progressing, and the clock was ticking. They needed to finish their mission before it was too late. As the squadron cleared the airspace, military intelligence teams moved in to neutralize the cyber threat. The battle wasn't over yet, but the worst of it was behind them. Anja and her team had ensured the safety of the operation, but their success was just one part of a much larger effort. As they landed back at base, Major Weber approached Anja, his face a mixture of exhaustion and pride. "We did it, Rogers. The cyber attack was contained. But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new kind of warfare." Anja nodded. She understood. The world was changing, and they had to be ready for whatever came next. This mission had shown her something important. The future of warfare wasn't just in the sky or on the ground. It was in the invisible, digital battles that were now part of their reality. And as a leader, she knew that adapting to this new world would require even more than the skills they had relied on in the past. It would require innovation, quick thinking, and an understanding of a different kind of combat. The squadron had proven their readiness once again, but Anja knew that their work had only just begun. The world was changing, and so was the nature of war. But she was ready to face it, ready to lead her team through whatever came next. As the days passed after the successful containment of the cyber attack, Anja and her squadron found themselves facing the uncomfortable truth of a rapidly evolving world. The mission had been a success, but it had shown them just how unprepared they were for the digital age of warfare. The squadron's usual training had focused on the physical aspect of combat, air-to-air and air-to-ground. But now the lines between technology and traditional combat were blurring, and Anja knew that they had to adapt, or they risked becoming obsolete. The following week, a new mission brief arrived, one that highlighted just how quickly things were changing. A rogue state had launched a series of hybrid warfare tactics, combining traditional military operations with sophisticated cyber attacks and misinformation campaigns. This new kind of warfare was unlike anything Anja had seen before. It was unconventional, unpredictable, and deeply destabilizing. The task was clear: track down the source of these hybrid attacks, neutralize the threat, and restore stability to the region. But Anja knew that this mission was more than just another airstrike or interception. It was a test of their ability to adapt to a world where the battlefield was no longer confined to the skies. The squadron was once again called upon to lead the charge. But this time, they weren't just flying missions. They were learning to navigate an entirely new kind of warfare. Major Weber gathered the pilots for the briefing, his usual authoritative demeanor replaced by something more serious, more urgent. The hybrid warfare they were facing was multifaceted. There were physical threats, of course, enemy forces positioned to attack key strategic locations. But there were also invisible threats, cyber attacks, misinformation, and propaganda aimed at destabilizing public confidence. Anja could see it in the faces of her fellow pilots. They weren't just preparing for combat. They were preparing to fight a war where nothing was as it seemed. The mission would involve a coordinated effort between air and ground forces, intelligence agencies, and cybersecurity experts. Anya's team would focus on neutralizing enemy forces and securing strategic locations, but there was also an added responsibility: gathering intelligence on the hybrid warfare tactics being used. The goal was to understand the enemy's new methods and prepare for the future of conflict. As the squadron prepared for the operation, Anya felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever before. She was no longer just a pilot leading her team through aerial combat. She was now at the forefront of a new kind of warfare, one that required not just physical prowess, but mental agility and strategic thinking. The mission began with the squadron flying reconnaissance over enemy territory, searching for signs of the hybrid attacks. They quickly discovered the extent of the misinformation campaign. Fake news, social media manipulation, and false intelligence were flooding the information networks. Anya knew they had to act quickly. If they didn't, the psychological damage caused by the misinformation could be just as dangerous as any military strike. As they approached the enemy's stronghold, the squadron faced an unexpected challenge. The enemy had set up a network of drones and unmanned aircraft, using them to create confusion and block their radar signals. The skies were filled with these autonomous craft, making it nearly impossible to track the true threat. The squadron engaged the drones, but Anya knew that this wasn't the primary objective. The real mission was on the ground, where enemy forces were preparing to strike key infrastructure. Anya gave the order to split the squadron into two teams. One would focus on taking down the drones and securing airspace, while the other would infiltrate the ground defenses and neutralize the enemy forces. The operation was fast and fluid, with the squadron using their combined skills to stay one step ahead of the enemy. As Anya's team engaged the drones, they encountered resistance from enemy fighters. The sky was once again filled with missiles and gunfire as the squadron navigated through the chaos. Anya's focus was unwavering. She tracked the enemy fighters with deadly precision, taking down one after another as the squadron continued to push forward. Meanwhile, the ground team successfully infiltrated the enemy's defenses and disabled key infrastructure, preventing the hybrid attacks from reaching their target. The operation lasted several hours, with both teams working in sync to neutralize the enemy threat. As the mission came to an end, the squadron returned to base, battered but victorious. The digital battlefield had proven to be just as challenging as the physical one, but Anya and her team had adapted. They had learned to fight in a world where the traditional rules of warfare no longer applied. When the squadron landed, Major Weber was waiting for Anya. His usual stern expression had softened, replaced with genuine respect. "Rogers, today you led us through the most complex operation we've ever faced. This isn't just about air combat anymore. It's about understanding the battlefield in a whole new way." Anya nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She knew that this mission had been a turning point, not just for the squadron, but for her as a leader. She had faced a new kind of warfare and had emerged victorious. But she also understood that this was just the beginning. The future of combat would demand even more of her, of all of them. The world was changing, and they would have to change with it. As Anya walked back to her quarters that evening, she felt a sense of resolve settle in her chest. She was no longer just a fighter pilot. She was a leader in a new kind of war. And whatever came next, she would be ready. The following months brought more missions, each one pushing Anya and her squadron to their limits. The world was in turmoil, and as much as Anya had hoped the worst was behind them, the reality was that the threats were evolving faster than anyone could predict. The hybrid warfare tactics had become more sophisticated, and each new operation felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Anya had become not just a leader of pilots, but a leader in a war that no one had fully prepared for. With every mission, her understanding of combat deepened. But as they prepared for yet another high-stakes operation, this one different from anything they had faced before, Anya couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was on the horizon. This mission was unlike any previous one. The squadron would be deployed to a region where conventional warfare was no longer possible. The airspace was heavily contested, and the ground forces were scattered, but the enemy had developed an arsenal of cutting-edge drones, autonomous and highly advanced, that could neutralize any aerial threat. The military had tasked Anja's squadron with the impossible: infiltrate the enemy's territory, disable the drone network, and provide strategic support to ground forces without engaging in direct aerial combat. This mission wasn't just about firepower. It was about stealth, precision, and adaptability. Anja studied the briefing with a growing sense of understanding. They weren't going in with the usual fighter jets and bombers. This time, it was about becoming part of the environment, blending in with the digital landscape, and using technology against the enemy. The future of warfare had already arrived, and Anja knew they had to adapt. The squadron was to be split into 2 units. One team would focus on disrupting the drone network with electronic warfare tactics, while the other would provide air support to ground forces, ensuring that the operation could succeed without direct confrontation. Anja's role was clear. She would lead the electronic warfare unit, coordinating with cyber specialists to take down the drones and their defense systems. The operation began early in the morning as the squadron took off toward the hostile territory. The sky was thick with clouds, and the first hint of dawn barely lit their path. Anja's heart was steady, but her mind was in overdrive. They were heading into enemy airspace where drones ruled the skies. The plan was simple: move in undetected, disable the drones' communication systems, and clear a path for the ground teams to take action. But as they approached the target zone, Anja's radar detected something unexpected: a second, more advanced layer of drone defense, one that had not been accounted for in the briefing. The enemy had adapted faster than anyone had anticipated. Anja keyed in the new data, quickly recalculating their strategy. They couldn't afford to underestimate the enemy now. As the squadron moved deeper into enemy territory, the drones appeared not as individual threats, but as a coordinated network, their movements synchronized, as if they were a single entity. The air was tense, and every pilot's focus was razor-sharp. Anja gave the order to engage. The team unleashed a barrage of electronic warfare tools: jammers, signal disruptors, and decoys, all designed to confuse and disable the drones. Anja's heart raced as the first wave of drones went offline, their systems crippled by the electronic assault. But the victory was short-lived. The enemy had anticipated this. A secondary defense system was activated, and suddenly the skies were filled with drones, more numerous and more advanced than before. This wasn't just a fight for control over the air, it was a battle for survival. Anja's team was in the thick of it, their jets weaving through a barrage of missile fire and drone attacks. The squadron's systems were working overtime, their radars locked on targets that seemed to multiply by the second. Anja's hand flew over her control panel, coordinating the disruption efforts as her team fought to stay in control. The sound of her heart pounding drowned out the comm chatter for a moment as she realized the magnitude of the operation. She couldn't do this alone. "Viper, stay on course. We need to push through this," Anja called out, her voice calm but filled with urgency. Major Weber's voice crackled back over the comms. "Copy that, Phoenix. Just keep us covered. We're moving in from the ground." Anja's fingers tightened around the controls as the F-22 dove sharply, using her aircraft's incredible maneuverability to stay ahead of the drones. The skies were a chaotic mess of electronic signals and enemy fire, but Anja moved with a purpose. She had learned long ago that a leader's resolve must never waver, no matter how difficult the task. She gave the order to shift tactics. "Jamming systems online. Let's take out their communications once and for all." With precision, Anya activated the signal disruptors, sending a massive wave of interference across the enemy's communications network. The drones faltered, their coordinated efforts falling apart as their communication systems went dark. The squadron's moment had arrived. They launched a final wave of missiles, targeting the drones with pinpoint accuracy. The airspace began to clear, the threat slowly fading as Anja's team took down drone after drone. The operation had been successful, but it had taken everything they had. As the squadron returned to base, Major Weber approached Anya once more, his expression one of admiration and weariness. "That was some of the most intense electronic warfare I've ever seen. You led us through a storm, Rogers. We couldn't have done it without you." Anya felt the weight of the mission sink in. The future of warfare wasn't about what they could destroy with bombs or missiles. It was about control. It was about knowing how to fight in the digital age. And Anya had just proven that they were ready for whatever came next. As she walked away from the debriefing, Anya knew that the battle for the future was just beginning. The next mission would come, and they would be ready no matter how the world changed. The success of the electronic warfare mission brought temporary relief, but Anya knew that the calm would not last. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy had begun integrating autonomous fighter jets into their operations, machines capable of operating without direct human control, with algorithms designed to counter any traditional tactics. This was a new frontier, a test of both skill and adaptability. Anya understood the implications immediately. They were no longer fighting only against human opponents. They were facing machines that could anticipate conventional maneuvers and react faster than any pilot could. The challenge required them to think differently, to innovate on the fly, and to trust in their instincts more than ever. The squadron convened in the briefing room, a sense of tension palpable in the air. Major Weber laid out the details of the operation. "These autonomous fighters are capable of rapid decision-making and advanced evasive maneuvers. They can process data faster than any human brain. We don't know the full extent of their capabilities, but the mission is to intercept and neutralize them before they breach our airspace." Anya listened intently, her mind already calculating the possibilities. She realized that traditional tactics would not work. They needed to adapt, to outthink machines that were designed to predict every human move. As the squadron prepared for the mission, Anya focused on a new approach. She reviewed the F-22's advanced systems, studying every sensor, every radar signature, and every electronic countermeasure. She knew that success depended on both technical mastery and instinctive decision-making. The mission began in the early hours of the morning. The squadron took to the skies under the cover of darkness, moving in tight formation as they approached the target area. Anya's radar flickered with activity. Multiple contacts appeared on the screens, the autonomous fighters advancing in precise formation. The enemy machines were faster than anything the squadron had faced before, their movements fluid and unpredictable. Anya keyed the microphone, her voice steady. "Phoenix to squadron, engage on my mark. Remember, these aren't human pilots. Anticipate the unexpected." The engagement began. Missiles streaked across the night sky, tracer lights cutting through darkness as both sides tested each other's limits. The autonomous fighters were relentless, anticipating attacks and adjusting trajectories with surgical precision. Anya maneuvered her F-22 with practiced skill, weaving through enemy fire while coordinating her squadron's movements. Her mind worked on multiple levels, calculating trajectories, predicting enemy responses, and adjusting tactics in real time. She engaged the first autonomous fighter, releasing a missile that narrowly hit its mark. The enemy responded immediately, adjusting its path to evade the remaining missiles. Anya didn't hesitate. She initiated a series of complex maneuvers, forcing the machine to respond in ways it hadn't anticipated. Within moments, the fighter was neutralized. The squadron followed her lead, engaging the remaining autonomous units. The battle was a high-speed chess match, each side anticipating the other's moves. Anya remained calm, her focus unbroken, her F-22 performing with flawless precision. Each engagement was a test of skill, reflex, and strategy. Gradually, the squadron began to gain the upper hand. Anya's instincts and experience allowed her to exploit weaknesses in the autonomous systems, and one by one, the enemy fighters fell. As the last autonomous fighter was destroyed, the squadron regrouped, scanning the skies for any remaining threats. None remained. The mission was a complete success. Back at base, Major Weber approached Anya, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and awe. "Rogers, you did it again. These machines were designed to outmatch humans, and yet you led the squadron to victory. I can't imagine how we could have done this without your leadership." Anya nodded quietly, feeling the weight of her words. She had faced a new kind of challenge, one that tested not only her flying skills, but her ability to think differently, to adapt in real time, and to lead her team under pressure. This mission had shown her that the future of aerial combat was no longer just about raw power or speed. It was about intelligence, adaptability, and leadership. As she walked away from the debriefing, Anya reflected on what they had just accomplished. The world of warfare had changed. Machines could outthink humans, cyber attacks could cripple entire nations, and hybrid strategies blurred the line between conventional and unconventional combat. But she knew one thing: as long as she could lead, adapt, and trust her instincts, she and her squadron would be ready for whatever came next. Anya Schmidt had become more than a pilot. She had become a leader in a rapidly evolving world where skill, strategy, and human ingenuity mattered more than ever before. As the weeks wore on, Anya and her squadron were once again thrust into the whirlwind of preparation and uncertainty. The military world was shifting, and their operations were becoming increasingly complex. With each passing mission, the nature of warfare evolved further, blending technological advancements with more traditional forms of combat. Anya knew that staying ahead meant continuously adapting to this changing landscape. One afternoon, a new mission was briefed. This time, the squadron was being called upon to perform a high-stakes reconnaissance mission in a region where conventional methods of intelligence gathering were no longer sufficient. Satellite feeds had gone dark, communication channels had been compromised, and traditional air reconnaissance was proving ineffective against just advanced jamming systems deployed by the enemy. The task was clear: gather critical intelligence on enemy movements and infrastructure without alerting them to their presence. It was a mission that required stealth, precision, and an unparalleled understanding of modern warfare tactics. Major Weber, more serious than usual, outlined the operation's complexities. The enemy has advanced anti-aircraft systems and drones designed to detect even the smallest signals. We cannot afford to engage unless absolutely necessary. This mission is about information gathering, not combat. Our goal is to get in, gather intelligence, and get out without being noticed. Anya listened intently, her mind already working through the tactical challenges. The squadron would rely on their stealth capabilities, using the F-22's advanced radar evasion systems to slip through undetected. Their goal was to fly deep into enemy airspace, collect intelligence, and return without leaving a trace. It would require a level of precision they had never attempted before. The mission began early as the squadron took off under the cover of darkness. The skies were clear, but Anya knew better than to let her guard down. They were entering enemy airspace with a target on their backs. The squadron moved like a shadow, flying at low altitudes, staying beneath the radar, their movements deliberate and calculated. As they entered the designated area, Anya keyed her microphone. "Phoenix to squadron, stay sharp. We're about to cross into enemy territory. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Our priority is gathering intel and getting out clean. The F-22s flew with unparalleled precision, their radar systems silently working to scan for enemy movement while avoiding detection. Anja's heart raced, not from fear, but from the intensity of the mission. This was about strategy, not firepower. Every decision had to be calculated. As they reached their target zone, Anja's radar flickered with activity. She immediately adjusted course, directing the squadron to a position where they could observe the enemy's movements without being detected. The region was heavily fortified, with military installations camouflaged within the terrain. Anja knew that if they were discovered now, the entire operation could be compromised. They had to be quick and efficient. The team worked in tandem, using their advanced systems to scan for anything unusual. Anja's focus was laser-sharp as she processed the data from her sensors, piecing together the intelligence in real time. The enemy was using advanced jamming systems, but the F-22's technology allowed the squadron to avoid detection while continuing their surveillance. Minutes felt like hours as they worked through the mission, gathering vital intelligence on enemy positions, supply routes, and military infrastructure. It wasn't long before Anja's instincts kicked in. Her sensors picked up movement, a possible threat. She immediately gave the order for a tactical retreat, guiding her squadron out of the area with the same precision they had used to enter. Phoenix to squadron, we're moving out. Stay close and maintain formation. We're exiting the zone. The squadron turned, their movements as smooth and coordinated as a well-rehearsed dance. They had accomplished their mission. They had gathered the intelligence they needed without alerting the enemy. But as they made their way back, Anja's radar detected something she hadn't anticipated. An enemy fighter had locked onto them. The situation had just escalated. Major Weber's voice came over the comms. "Rogers, we've been spotted. They know we're here." Anja's mind raced. They had to make a decision, and fast. They couldn't engage unless absolutely necessary, but they also couldn't let the enemy compromise the mission. Without a moment's hesitation, Anja issued the command. "Viper, engage. We don't leave anyone behind. Phoenix, you're with me. We take them down, fast and clean." The enemy fighter streaked toward them, its missiles ready to launch. Anja's squadron responded immediately, breaking formation to outmaneuver the threat. The F-22s split into two groups, flanking the enemy fighter and positioning themselves for the counterattack. Anja's mind raced as she engaged the enemy, her F-22 responding with precision as she lined up the perfect shot. She fired, the missile streaking through the sky. The enemy fighter exploded in a burst of flame, its threat neutralized. The mission was far from over, but the immediate danger had passed. The squadron regrouped and returned to base, their hearts racing from the adrenaline of the encounter. As they touched down, Major Weber was already waiting for them. His expression was one of both relief and admiration. "You did it again, Rogers. You led us through a mission that should have been impossible, and you kept your squadron safe. We got the intel, and we're still in one piece." Anja nodded, the weight of the mission settling in. It had been a close call, but they had succeeded. The world was shifting, and warfare was changing. But one thing was certain. Anja and her squadron had proven once again that they were ready for anything. The future of combat would be defined by technology and strategy, and they were prepared to face it head-on. As Anja walked away from the debriefing, she felt a sense of accomplishment. They had completed the mission, gathered vital intelligence, engaged when necessary, and survived. But in her heart, she knew that this wasn't the end. There would always be more challenges, more missions to prove themselves. The battle for the future of warfare had only just begun, and Anja was ready to lead her team into whatever came next. As the months went by, the pace of operations only accelerated. The nature of conflict continued to evolve, and with each mission, Anya found herself facing increasingly sophisticated threats. The squadron was no longer just dealing with the conventional enemies they had trained to fight. Now they were dealing with enemies who could think faster, adapt quicker, and exploit technology in ways that even the most advanced military systems hadn't anticipated. Despite the constant pressure, Anya's resolve only grew stronger. She had become more than a pilot. She had become a strategist, a leader capable of guiding her squadron through the complexities of modern warfare. It wasn't just about aerial superiority anymore. It was about understanding how the battlefield was changing and adapting faster than the enemy. A new mission briefing came one early morning, and as Anya entered the room, she could sense that this one was going to be different. The briefing was unusually quiet, and Major Weber's face was more serious than she had ever seen it. The room was filled with high-ranking officers, and everyone was focused on the display screen in front of them. The operation they were being assigned was a joint task force mission, involving not only aerial assets, but ground forces and cybersecurity teams. The enemy had developed a new kind of weapon, an electromagnetic pulse, EMP device, capable of disabling military and civilian systems across vast areas. The weapon was rumored to be hidden in a remote, heavily guarded location. The goal of the mission was to infiltrate the area, neutralize the threat, and secure the EMP device before it could be activated. This wasn't just about fighting an enemy on the ground or in the sky. It was about preventing a technological catastrophe that could cripple entire nations. Anya listened carefully as Major Weber outlined the mission. The squadron would be split into two teams. One would provide air cover and suppress enemy defenses, while the other would coordinate with ground forces to locate and disable the EMP device. The mission was dangerous and high stakes. There were no guarantees of success. As Anya processed the details, she could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. The squadron's task was clear: stop the EMP weapon before it could be activated. But Anya also understood the larger implication of the mission. If the weapon was deployed, the consequences could be catastrophic, not only for the region, but for the entire world. They couldn't afford to fail. The team took off in the early hours of the morning, their aircraft cutting through the cold air like shadows. The mission was delicate, requiring both precision and stealth. As they approached the enemy's fortified base, Anya's radar began picking up multiple hostile signals: surface-to-air missiles, enemy fighters, and unmanned drones designed to track and neutralize any incoming threats. The air was thick with tension. Anya gave the order for the squadron to fly low, using the terrain for cover. "Phoenix to squadron, stay below radar. We don't want to tip them off until we're in position. Viper, you're with me. Cover the ground team's insertion." The squadron moved as one, their planes flying in perfect formation, slipping through enemy airspace undetected. They had to make it to the target without alerting the enemy. Every move had to be calculated. Every second counted. The ground team was already on the move, but they wouldn't have long. The moment the enemy realized what was happening, all hell would break loose. As the squadron approached the target area, Anya's radar picked up a large cluster of enemy drones converging on their position. It was clear the enemy was aware of their presence now. The time for stealth was over. "Viper, engage the drones. Phoenix, we'll provide cover for the ground team. Let's move," Anya barked, her voice unwavering as she led the charge. The squadron broke formation, engaging the drones with precise, calculated strikes. The battle was fast and furious, but Anya's focus never wavered. They had to protect the ground team at all costs. As the drones were neutralized, Anya's F-22 continued to provide air cover, taking down enemy fighters that attempted to break through their defenses. The squadron worked in perfect harmony, executing maneuvers with flawless precision. But the real challenge lay on the ground. The enemy's base was heavily fortified, and the EMP device was well guarded. Anja's squadron had done their part to clear the skies, but the ground forces had to navigate the labyrinth of defenses to reach the device. The moments stretched into what felt like hours as Anja's squadron kept the pressure on the enemy, ensuring that the ground team could get close enough to disable the weapon. Finally, the signal came through. The EMP device had been located and was in the process of being disabled. Anja's heart raced as she heard the good news. They had succeeded. The mission had been completed without any catastrophic events. The squadron returned to base in silence, each member exhausted but relieved. The weight of what they had prevented hung heavily in the air. Major Weber met them as they landed, his usual stern demeanor replaced by a look of genuine pride. "We did it. You all did it. This was more than just a mission. It was a turning point in the way we understand warfare. You've proven once again that we are ready for whatever comes next." Anja nodded, feeling the weight of the words. This mission, like so many before it, had been a test of their ability to adapt and evolve. The future of warfare wasn't just about fighting with technology. It was about understanding how to use it in ways that could protect the future of their world. As Anja walked off the tarmac, she knew that they had passed another crucial test, but she also knew that the world was changing faster than ever before. And with that change came new challenges, new missions, and new responsibilities. Whatever came next, she was ready. The future was uncertain, but she was determined to lead her squadron through it, no matter what. The months after the EMP mission brought a new set of challenges. The world, it seemed, was in a constant state of flux. While Anja and her squadron had successfully neutralized one major threat, it was clear that the future of warfare was evolving at a pace that was hard to keep up with. New technologies, new enemies, and new forms of combat were emerging every day. Anja found herself constantly preparing for the next mission, always staying one step ahead, but wondering when the next unknown challenge would come. And it did. It came in the form of a classified briefing that shook Anja to her core. The briefing room was filled with senior officers and analysts, all of whom had an air of seriousness that Anja had never encountered before. Major Weber stood at the front, his face tense, his expression unreadable. When the briefing began, it was clear that the threat they were facing this time was unlike anything they had ever encountered. An intelligence report had revealed a new weapon, an advanced hypersonic missile capable of traveling at speeds of up to Mach 10. A weapon so fast that no existing defense system could intercept it. Worse still, the missile had been launched from a mobile platform, making it nearly impossible to track and destroy. The mission was clear: find the missile, neutralize the launch platform, and prevent the weapon from reaching its target. This was a mission with no room for error. If the hypersonic missile was allowed to reach its target, it could cause catastrophic damage to an entire nation. Anja listened carefully as Major Weber outlined the operation. The squadron would be split into two teams, one to conduct aerial reconnaissance and disable enemy radar systems, and the other to provide ground support and track the missile's path. It was a race against time. The location of the missile launch platform was still unknown, but the intelligence suggested that it could be anywhere in a vast hostile territory. Anja's role was critical. As the leader of the aerial team, she would have to track the missile and ensure the squadron's air superiority while also guiding the ground team to the launch site. The operation would require a level of coordination they had never attempted before. Anja knew the stakes. This mission wasn't just about protecting the airspace. It was about preventing an unprecedented global catastrophe. The squadron took off at dawn, their planes cutting through the sky as they approached the target area. Anja's mind was laser-focused as she led the formation. They flew at high speed, scanning the terrain below, looking for any sign of the missile launch platform. They encountered hostile airspace almost immediately, as enemy fighters scrambled to protect their missile. Anya gave the order to engage, and the squadron responded with precision, taking down enemy aircraft with a calm efficiency that had become second nature. But the real threat was still ahead. As they got closer to the suspected launch site, Anya's radar began to pick up unusual activity. The missile was on the move. They had to act fast. "Phoenix to Viper, I have a lock on the missile. It's moving faster than we anticipated. We need to close the gap and intercept it now." The squadron moved in, engaging the missile's evasive systems and trying to gain a visual on the mobile platform. But the missile's speed made it nearly impossible to get close. Anya knew they couldn't rely on conventional methods. They had to think outside the box. The F-22's advanced systems were a step ahead, though. Anya activated the aircraft's advanced sensor fusion system, using the radar to track the missile's heat signature while simultaneously jamming enemy communications. It was a delicate balance of technology and tactics. As the missile closed in on its target, Anya's heart raced. This was the moment they had been preparing for. With a final calculated move, Anya locked onto the missile's trajectory and fired. The missile shot out of the F-22's launch bay, streaking through the sky at Mach 4, faster than anything the enemy could react to. There was a blinding flash as the missile made contact with the hypersonic missile, and in an instant the threat was neutralized. Anya's squadron had done it. The hypersonic missile was destroyed before it could reach its target, but the mission wasn't over yet. They had to track down the launch platform and eliminate the remaining threat. The squadron moved in, engaging ground targets as they scoured the area for the mobile launch platform. It wasn't long before they found it, hidden in a remote location and surrounded by heavy defenses. Anya and her team moved in, clearing the area of any remaining enemy forces while ground support teams disabled the platform. The operation was a success. The hypersonic missile had been destroyed, and the launch platform had been neutralized. The world was safe, for now. When the squadron returned to base, Major Weber approached Anya, his face etched with exhaustion but filled with pride. "You did it, Rogers. You kept us in the game and led us to victory. We couldn't have done it without your leadership." Anya nodded, feeling the weight of the mission settle on her shoulders. This had been one of the most difficult operations they had ever faced, but they had succeeded. They had prevented a global disaster. As Anya walked away from the debriefing, she couldn't help but think of the future. The world was changing faster than anyone could predict. The weapons of tomorrow were faster, more powerful, and more unpredictable. But Anya also knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, she and her squadron would be ready. The future of warfare was uncertain, but she would lead her team through it, no matter what. The weeks after the high-speed flight demonstration were calmer than expected. For once, there were no urgent drills, no complex exercises to coordinate. Anya found herself in a reflective mood, thinking back on all the scenarios they had faced together. She had led her squadron through some of the most intricate and challenging situations, and each success had brought them closer as a team. But despite the calm, Anya couldn't shake the feeling that a new opportunity for growth was on the horizon. The world of aviation was in a constant state of flux, and the challenges they faced were growing more sophisticated. One morning, that sense of anticipation became reality. Anya was called to a high-priority briefing. As she entered the room, Major Weber was already there, standing beside the technical officers. The room was focused, and Anya knew something important was coming. The briefing started with an intriguing piece of news. An advanced fleet of opposing aircraft, equipped with new sensor-evading technology, was entering the training zone. The other team had been using tactics they had never encountered before, groups of small, highly maneuverable craft designed to test conventional navigation systems. These new aircraft were not only difficult to detect, but capable of outmaneuvering even the most advanced jets. The objective was clear in theory: meet the fleet before it reached the designated zone, successfully navigate the challenge, and complete the exercise. But the complexity of the situation lay in the unknown. They didn't know the full capabilities of these aircraft. They didn't know their top speed, how many there were, or what their ultimate flight path was. The only thing they knew for sure was that they were excited to meet this new challenge. As Major Weber outlined the exercise, Anya felt her mind sharpen. This would require more than just tactical flying. It would require innovation. It would require thinking in ways they hadn't before. The squadron would need to find the fleet before it reached the final coordinates. But these new aircraft were designed to evade detection, using advanced countermeasures to confuse tracking systems. Anja's team would need to rely on their skills, their instincts, and their ability to stay one step ahead. The exercise was high level, and the outcome was far from guaranteed. But Anja knew they had to try. As the squadron prepared for takeoff, Anja took a moment to assess her team. They had trained together, flown together, and succeeded together, but this exercise was different. They were heading into uncharted territory, facing a new kind of challenge. She trusted her pilots, and the novel nature of the task made her feel energized. She knew they had no choice but to go in prepared for anything. The squadron took off in tight formation, the aircraft gliding through the sky as they moved toward the target zone. As they neared the edge of the exercise area, Anja's radar began to pick up unusual readings. The signals were intermittent, with several contacts appearing and disappearing as the other aircraft used their advanced technology to remain hidden. Anja's focus intensified. This was the moment they had been preparing for. She keyed her microphone. "Phoenix to squadron. Stay alert. They are using advanced techniques, so expect the unexpected. We can't track them like we normally would. We'll have to rely on visual cues and instinct." The squadron moved cautiously, flying at a different altitude to maintain a low profile. The sky around them was empty, but Anja's radar was still picking up strange signals, blips that came and went in the blink of an eye. She could feel her excitement rising. Then, in an instant, it happened. The first wave of opposing aircraft appeared from the clouds, moving toward them at high speed. Anja's systems immediately locked onto the closest targets. She engaged, watching as a light pulse streaked away, successfully tagging one of the participants, but the rest were faster and more agile than anything they had faced before. The other craft moved in formation, approaching from every direction. The squadron's sensors were active with signals as they tried to track and follow the incoming aircraft. Anya worked to maintain her course, her fingers moving quickly over the controls as she engaged again, successfully tagging another aircraft. But there were many of them. They were everywhere, darting in and out of range, evading every attempt to lock onto them. Anya knew they couldn't keep this up for long. The squadron needed to regroup. "Viper, Phoenix, let's adjust and reorient. We need to reset and approach this from a different angle," Anja called, trying to remain composed under pressure. Major Weber's voice came through the comms, clear and focused. "Understood, Phoenix. We're with you." Anja quickly adjusted her tactics. She realized that the key to succeeding in this exercise wasn't simply engaging them head-on. The other aircraft were too fast, too unpredictable. She would have to outthink them. Anya initiated a series of high-speed maneuvers, using the terrain to her advantage, staying below the other team's radar while realigning her position. She knew she couldn't engage the entire group at once. They needed to divide and coordinate. As the squadron reformed, Anja's plan came together. They would split into two groups, one to draw the other aircraft into a specific pattern, and the other to approach from a new angle. The maneuver was bold, but it was their best option. The squadron moved into position, and Anja's heart raced as the first wave of aircraft took the bait. The plan worked. The opposing craft followed their decoys, giving Anja and the second group the opening they needed. In a series of rapid moves, Anja's squadron began to successfully tag the other aircraft, one by one. The group tactics were no match for their precision. Within minutes, the opposing fleet was fully outmaneuvered, and the objective was achieved. As the squadron returned to base, Anja allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had done it. The skies were clear once again. When they landed, Major Weber met them on the tarmac, his face filled with pride. "You did it, Rogers. That was one of the most unpredictable exercises we've faced, and you led us through it. You and your squadron were ready for a challenge that no one saw coming." Anja nodded quietly, her mind already looking ahead to the next opportunity. They had faced an unknown scenario, one unlike anything they had trained for, and emerged successful. But Anja knew this was just another step on the journey. The future of flight technology was still evolving, but she was ready to face whatever came next. She would lead her squadron through every challenge, adapting to the evolving world of aerial navigation, one mission at a time. After the swarm of advanced stealth fighters had been neutralized, Anja's squadron found themselves in a brief period of reprieve. The air felt different, thicker somehow, as though they were all collectively holding their breath. The mission had been a success, but the constant pressure was beginning to weigh on everyone. Anja, too, felt it. Each victory, each mission completed, was a step forward. But in the back of her mind, she knew that the world they were operating in was becoming increasingly volatile. Technology was advancing, enemies were growing more unpredictable, and the stakes were getting higher with each passing day. There was no time for complacency, and that feeling was reinforced when Anja received a direct call from Major Weber late one evening. He had a serious tone in his voice, the kind that signaled a change in tempo. "Rogers, we've just received intel. There's been a leak, something big. A powerful conglomerate of rogue states is teaming up, combining their military might and tech innovations. They're pooling their resources to develop a new generation of AI-driven weapons, far more advanced than anything we've seen before. This isn't just an arms race anymore. It's a battle for technological dominance. We need to strike before they fully activate these weapons." The urgency in his voice made it clear this wasn't going to be a standard mission. Anja, as the leader of the squadron, understood the weight of what was at stake. If these rogue states succeeded in activating their AI-driven weapons, it could tip the balance of power, potentially leaving entire regions vulnerable to attacks that no one could predict or defend against. The task was clear: intercept their operations, eliminate the AI threats, and neutralize the weapons before they could be deployed. But with the stakes so high, Anja knew this was going to be their most difficult challenge yet. The briefing was unlike any Anja had attended before. The intel suggested that the rogue states had already begun testing their AI weapon systems in a secret location, an underground facility heavily protected by state-of-the-art security measures, drones, and automated defenses. The squadron would need to infiltrate the site, disable the AI infrastructure, and prevent the activation of the weapons. It was a complex mission requiring both technical expertise and unparalleled coordination. As the squadron assembled for the operation, Anja felt a quiet resolve build inside her. This was more than just a mission to safeguard European airspace. It was a battle to preserve the global balance of power. If they failed, the consequences could be catastrophic. The operation was a multi-phase mission. The first phase would involve aerial reconnaissance to locate the facility and assess the enemy defenses. The second phase would require an assault on the facility, with ground teams moving in to disable the AI weapon systems while the squadron provided air cover. Anja's heart was steady, but her mind was already planning their moves, anticipating potential threats and obstacles. The squadron's F-22s were equipped with the latest stealth technologies, but the real challenge lay in the unpredictable nature of the AI systems they would encounter. They had no idea how quickly the enemy could adapt, or how formidable the defenses would be. The mission began early the next morning. The squadron soared into the sky, flying toward the enemy-controlled territory where the AI weapons were being developed. The skies were clear, but Anja knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. As they neared the target zone, the first wave of enemy drones appeared, sleek, fast, and highly maneuverable. The drones were autonomous, and they were designed to defend the facility with ruthless efficiency. The squadron was ready. Anja's voice rang out over the comms, calm but commanding. "Phoenix to squadron, engage on my mark. Keep your distance and avoid unnecessary risks. We need the drones down, but we can't afford to alert the main facility yet." The squadron launched into action, their F-22s moving with precision. As they engaged the drones, Anja's mind was sharp as she processed the data coming through her radar. The drones were fast, but they weren't prepared for the squadron's well-coordinated strikes. Within minutes, the airspace was clear of drones, but Anja knew they were only facing the first layer of defenses. The real challenge was still ahead. The squadron made their final approach to the underground facility, and as they neared the location, the magnitude of the task became clear. The site was heavily fortified. Several layers of automated defenses surrounded the entrance, including anti-aircraft guns, advanced sensor systems, and even more drones. But Anja and her squadron weren't intimidated. This was what they had trained for. The ground teams moved in, and Anja's squadron provided air cover, taking out any remaining defenses while also neutralizing incoming automated fighters. They engaged with deadly precision, the F-22s weaving through the skies, launching missiles and countering the enemy's attacks. As the squadron worked to maintain control of the skies, Anja's radar picked up a sudden surge of activity. The facility had begun to activate the AI-driven weapons systems. The countdown had started. Anja's pulse quickened. They were running out of time. "Phoenix to squadron, we need to move fast. The countdown has started. Get in there and stop the activation. We can't afford any delays." The squadron pressed on, engaging the remaining automated defenses while coordinating with the ground teams to infiltrate the facility. They moved like a well-oiled machine, executing each move with precision. Anja's leadership kept them focused. Every decision was critical, and she didn't allow a single mistake. As the countdown neared its final moments, the ground team successfully disabled the AI systems. The mission was a success. The threat had been neutralized. As the squadron returned to base, Anja felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The mission had been one of their most dangerous, but they had prevailed. Major Weber approached her, his voice filled with respect. "Rogers, you've outdone yourself. This was the toughest mission we've faced, and you led us through it. The world is safer because of what we've accomplished today." Anja nodded quietly. She knew that the threats would only continue to grow, that the challenges of the future would only become more complex. But for now, she had done her part. She had led her squadron through one of their most difficult battles yet, and they had emerged victorious. As she walked off the tarmac, Anja thought about the future. The world was changing rapidly, and with it, the nature of warfare. But she was ready. The next mission would come, and whatever it entailed, she knew that her squadron would face it together. They were more than just a team. They were a family, ready to protect the world from any threat that came their way. The victory over the AI-driven weapon systems was a turning point for Anja and her squadron, but it also served as a stark reminder of the world they now lived in. A world where warfare wasn't confined to physical battlefields anymore. The new technologies, the ever-evolving threats, and the blurred lines between traditional and unconventional warfare had changed the rules. Despite the success of their mission, Anja couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered. This was the future of combat, unpredictable, complex, and increasingly reliant on technology. As the days passed, the squadron was given a brief reprieve from active operations. though Anja knew it wouldn't last. Every mission, every engagement was just one step in an ongoing struggle. The world was too unstable, the threats too numerous. The brief quiet allowed Anja to take a step back and reflect on how far she had come, how much she had grown, not just as a pilot, but as a leader. The leadership skills she had honed, skills that had once been tested in the heat of battle, were now tested in more subtle ways. Her squadron relied on her to lead with conviction, but also with a deep understanding of the shifting nature of warfare. It wasn't just about combat anymore. It was about making decisions that balanced the tactical with the moral, the immediate with the long term. And Anja had come to realize that being a leader wasn't just about winning battles. It was about knowing when to step back and assess the bigger picture. As the quiet period stretched on, Anja was given the opportunity to sit in on several high-level strategy meetings. The constant flow of intelligence reports, satellite feeds, and diplomatic briefings only reinforced the complexity of the situation. The world was on edge, and the threats were increasingly unpredictable. The squadron's role, it seemed, was only going to become more integral in the future. One evening, as Anja sat in the briefing room, Major Weber's voice broke through the quiet. He had a somber look on his face. The usual briefing had changed. This time, it wasn't about a specific mission or target. It was about a new, emerging threat, one that had nothing to do with aircraft or missiles, but with information. The intelligence community had uncovered an unprecedented cyber operation, a global misinformation campaign designed to destabilize entire nations. The scope of the campaign was vast, with social media platforms, news outlets, and even encrypted messaging systems being manipulated by unknown actors. The goal was to weaken public trust in government institutions, disrupt economies, and create chaos. This was a new kind of war, one that was fought not with bombs or fighters, but with ideas and narratives. The mission, though different from anything they had previously faced, was clear. The squadron was being called upon to assist in the cyber defense efforts. They were to work in tandem with cybersecurity teams to track and disrupt the origins of the misinformation campaigns. This wasn't about air superiority or physical defense. This was about intelligence, information warfare, and preventing the enemy from sowing chaos. Anja found herself once again at the forefront of a new kind of conflict. The squadron would provide aerial support and surveillance, using their advanced systems to monitor the flow of information and trace the sources of the attack. They would be working alongside cyber specialists to disrupt the enemy's operations and restore order to the information networks. As the mission began, the squadron moved into position, flying at high altitudes to monitor the flow of communication. Anja's radar systems were deployed to detect anomalies in the network, while the cybersecurity teams worked in tandem to trace the origins of the misinformation. The operation was unlike any they had faced before. It wasn't about physical engagement, it was about information, control, and manipulation. The enemy wasn't in the sky, they were in the shadows, behind screens and codes, operating in the virtual world. Anja's F-22s became surveillance platforms, their advanced systems monitoring communications, intercepting data, and scanning for any signs of compromise. As the mission unfolded, Anja realized just how deeply intertwined technology had become with warfare. The enemy was no longer just a physical presence to be tracked and destroyed. They were invisible, operating in cyberspace, manipulating the very information that shaped society. The squadron worked tirelessly, their systems scanning the vast web of communication networks, identifying the sources of the misinformation and disrupting their activities. They worked in close coordination with the intelligence community, tracing the origins of the attacks and working to sever the enemy's influence. It was a new kind of combat, one that Anja had never imagined. The mission was long and grueling, But in the end, they succeeded. The misinformation campaign was disrupted, the sources identified and neutralized, and the threat to national stability was minimized. But as the squadron returned to base, Anja felt the weight of the mission settle in her chest. This had been a victory, but it was also a reminder that warfare was no longer confined to the skies or the battlefield. It was everywhere, in the data, in the information, in the narratives that shaped the world. The squadron had proven once again that they were ready for whatever came next, but Anja knew that this was only the beginning. The future of warfare was going to be more complex, more nuanced, and more unpredictable. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to lead her squadron through them, into the new era of combat, where technology, information, and strategy would be as important as any weapon or aircraft. The days following the misinformation mission were a time of reflection for Anja. The operation had been a success, but it had shown her just how much the world had changed. Technology had blurred the lines between physical and digital warfare, and the threat now came not just from enemy fighters or missiles, but from algorithms and data streams. Anja couldn't help but wonder what the future held for the next generation of pilots. The days when combat was about dogfights and precision strikes were becoming a thing of the past. As she sat in her office, reviewing mission reports and intelligence updates, Major Weber's voice interrupted her thoughts. He was standing at the door, his expression serious but calm. "Rogers, we've got something new. The global security landscape is shifting again. A new coalition of nations has formed, and they're testing a new generation of autonomous weaponry. It's not just air combat anymore. These systems are designed for multi-domain operations: land, sea, air, and cyberspace. We've got to stay ahead of the curve, and I need you to lead the charge." Anja nodded, her mind already processing the new mission. This was no longer about fighting one specific threat, but about understanding the way global conflict was evolving. The mission would require not only their piloting skills, but also the ability to understand and counter the growing influence of autonomous weapons across multiple domains. The briefing was intense. The squadron would be deployed to a region where this new coalition was testing its autonomous systems. These weapons were capable of operating independently, making decisions on the fly, and adapting to changing situations. The goal was clear: infiltrate their testing zones, neutralize the autonomous systems, and prevent the coalition from further developing these weapons. Anja's heart was steady. This mission would test everything they had learned in the years leading up to it. It wasn't just about intercepting enemy aircraft. It was about outthinking a system that could think for itself. The squadron took off the next morning, their aircraft cutting through the sky with precision and focus. The air was clear, but Anja knew better than to relax. They were flying into a high-risk zone, and they couldn't afford to make a single mistake. As they approached the testing grounds, Anja's radar began to pick up a series of unusual readings, patterns that didn't match any known aircraft signatures. It was the autonomous systems. The enemy had already begun their tests, and they were using their new weaponry to counter any incoming threats. The squadron split into two teams. One would provide air cover and disrupt the enemy's electronic systems, while the other would target the ground-based autonomous systems. Anja led the strike team, flying at high speed as they approached their first target. She could see the enemy's automated drones in the distance, darting across the sky, moving with unnerving precision. They were operating independently, but Anja knew that her team had an advantage. They had the experience, the tactics, and the intuition that the machines couldn't replicate. The battle began, and the squadron engaged the enemy drones with precision. Anja and her team took out one after another, but the autonomous systems adapted quickly. They adjusted their flight paths, changed tactics, and used countermeasures that Anja hadn't seen before. It was like fighting against a living, breathing entity that was always one step ahead. But Anja didn't back down. She adapted, using her knowledge of the systems to anticipate their moves. The squadron worked as one, attacking from multiple angles, forcing the drones into predictable patterns. Slowly but surely, they began to break through the enemy defenses. With every successful engagement, Anja could feel the weight of the mission lifting. This wasn't just a victory in the air, it was a statement. The future of warfare might be changing, but Anja and her squadron had proven that human intuition, creativity, and leadership could still outmatch the machines. As the last of the drones fell from the sky, Anja's squadron regrouped and moved to their next target, the ground-based autonomous weapon systems. The terrain was more difficult, the defenses more advanced. But Anja and her team pressed on, taking out the automated weapons with expert precision. They moved like a single unit, their actions synchronized, their purpose clear. After hours of intense combat, the mission was complete. The autonomous systems had been neutralized, and the threat to global security had been eliminated. As the squadron returned to base, Major Weber approached Anja, his face reflecting the pride he felt for the team's success. "Rogers, that was one of the most challenging missions we've faced. You led us through a fight that no one could have predicted. The future of warfare is changing, but you've proven that we can still stay ahead of the curve." Anja nodded, her mind still processing the enormity of what they had just accomplished. The future of warfare would undoubtedly be defined by autonomous weapons, artificial intelligence, and technology. But Anja also knew that the human element, the ability to adapt, to think strategically, to lead, would always be the deciding factor in the end. She looked out over the base, feeling a sense of peace for the first time in a long while. They had faced the unknown and had come out victorious. But she also knew that the world would continue to change, and when it did, she and her squadron would be ready. The future wasn't just about technology or machines. It was about leadership, courage, and the ability to rise to whatever challenges the world would throw at them. Anja was ready for whatever came next. The future was theirs to shape.